So with that, inviting Divya Singh to walk us through this interesting topic. So once again, put your hands together for Divya Singh.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you are having a great time here at GHC. We know we are right here after the lunch, so why don't we quickly look at a fun exercise before we start the topic? And here you go, find the difference. While you all are taking a couple of seconds here to identify the difference between these two ducks, I would want to instill a quick thought in your minds. When we compare these two, what are we looking at? Are we looking at the data points, which means how do they look like? What's their color? How does it differentiate from each other, right? And on a very similar lines, I believe all of us here have some data points which are with respect to us that separates us or uniquely identifies us. When we talk about personal information, it could be our full name, it could be our address that we belong to, or when we talk about the contact information, it is like our telephone numbers, email IDs, and so on and so forth. And now, quickly moving on to the financial information. Our bank account numbers, credit cards, various transactions that we do day in, day out, are really the ones which are the personal identifiable information that helps us to understand a lot of us here. And this data, imagine all across the globe. How huge is that? How big is that? And how secretive is that? Because it is definitely the personally identifiable information for all of us. But is this information something which is available to all? It is the golden goose that everyone wants to be a part of. Imagine all financial institutions, hedge funds, and fintech startups have access to all our information. Would we like it? It is like bringing your own secrets to the party, which I believe not many of us would really like or even appreciate it. But at the same point of time, we really understand that this is the data that all these financial ecosystem needs. And here is the caveat. At one side, we really look at safeguarding our personal information, but at the second time, we also need to have the access of it. And this is where our problem statement is. The more data you have, the more insights you gain, and the better decisions you make. But what if your data is locked? And that's where we look at a solution today. What's the solution? Would it be funny if I really say the solution lies with the ducks that we saw prior? Does it ring a bell? Yes, the rubber ducks, the ultimate decoy. The ducks that quacks, walks, and looks like a duck, but is a duck which looks like a duck. It is not a real duck. So very similar lines. If we look at the synthetic data that is there for finance, it will help to answer a lot many questions that the finance ecosystem needs with a real-like data and not a data which is our own, which means we have the information with no liability. And that's where, when we go on from here, we would talk about revolutionizing financial data with digital twins, the future of synthetic data generation. Before we deep dive into the topic, I'll give a quick introduction about myself. Once again, good afternoon. I am Divya Singh, Engineering Director at American Express. I had to have my co-speaker here, but she got diagnosed with dengue, and she would not make it to here, but then she's recovering well. And that's our MX family and MX presence all across the globe for you. This is the agenda item that we see and we'll talk about and cover today. Now, since we're talking so much about digital twin, right, a quick look on what are the market trends looks like for digital twin. We are at a market value of $24.97 billion today. And we are also looking at a projected score of $155.8 billion going forward. Definitely, when we look At a couple of years down the line, this market is set to explode. Now, it also has a question, why do we say so? What are the trends that helps us to identify that this market is the one which is really capitalizing? The first one, IoT, Internet of Things, that will help us to really create those digital duplicates, which are, again, the real-like physical objects, simulations and emulations, something which is a real-like. We saw the rubber duck in the prior example, a real-like duck that is able to interact and have a similar behavior that we expect from a duck, but it is not really that. AI, artificial intelligence, we all know how important it is at this moment. AI helps us to analyze our data and also help us to derive financial insights out of it, or rather any insights of it, to help us make better decisions and be more cognizant of what we are trying to do. The last, but definitely not the least, cloud computing. We all know how much the world has progressed in the world of cloud. Easy access to data, easy storage of data would really help us to understand this ecosystem of digital twins. Going further, since we have spoken about digital twin, and we are identifying how it marries the generation of synthetic data, now what we look forward is our synthetic data generation. We did speak about what are the various challenges today when we start using our production data. The first challenge we already did speak is the limitations that we need with respect to privacy concerns. But is that all? Absolutely not. There's much more. When you talk about biasness in the historical data, there's much more biasness. And I can give you an example. Imagine maybe a decade back, people of the generation would not have that much of financial awareness. And when I say awareness, also accessibility. But now, if we look at the generation today, they'll have access to credit cards, e-commerce, and all that stuff. So if we base our conclusion from the historical data that we had at that point of time, it would not work in the present world today. Which is why, if we base our analysis on data which is historical, it would have definitely some biasness. Coming back to regulatory compliance, you cannot have a financial ecosystem without meeting the lay of the land, the regulations that specific geography has to offer. Again, we look at the high cost of data collection and the testing robustness that's all across. So with all these concerns, and of course the privacy one, that is the topmost one here, we cannot look at really this production data as an option for us. Moving on, we look for how can we create this synthetic data using digital twin. The first step there is how do we source the data, which is the data ingestion. You can have multiple and varied sources or various system of records for us to generate the data from. It could be data connection, it could be APIs, or any other even manual source of data that we could collect the information from. Going to next, data modeling, which is very important. Why? Because do you remember the duck example prior? The duck that quacks, walks, and also acts like a duck. So this modeling helps us to understand what are the various characteristics, properties, relationships of the data. So which is why this modeling will help us to understand what are those statistical models all across. Going to the next one, we have the synthetic data generation. This is where we implement the algorithms based on the study that we did prior, understanding the various model characteristics, we implement this synthetic data generation here. Going to the next one. What we look forward here is for the privacy and security controls. Like I said prior, there cannot be a system that looks at privacy and controls and be in a finance system. So we are really looking at techniques that helps you to encrypt the data or anonymize the information and definitely have a limited access control. Going to the next one, we are looking at what is called validation and testing. We cannot have a product or a process or a system in market which has not been able to be tested to the benchmarks that we have. And this step will help us to match it to the industry benchmarks for us to understand if its data is worthy of being used or not being used. And then moving to the last one, which is deployment and monitoring. This is not a one-time effort, right? Because the data needs to live up to the expectations and it will be refilled back again, right? So for that matter, we really need to have a process, which is a continuous process. We all have worked in Agile, where we are looking at a continuous process of monitoring and deployment. And there is a regular test in lower environments and also looking for the accomplishments and the effectiveness of it. Now we all saw what is digital twin, how can we create synthetic data, going on to the use cases of it. The first one, I believe all of us would shop here. Maybe the brand I like, a lot of you might not. Or my preference would still going to the offline stores, while a lot of you might still do online shopping. So that comes to a customer's preferences. What is my preference as a customer, which is very unique to all of us, which is why for all the financial institutions to really put a marketing strategy, what they need is to understand their customers. And that can only be done if they understand about what persona are they dealing us, which is why customer segment marketing is very important. And your data that you're creating will aid this customer segmentation. Predictive analytics. I'll talk about an incident. Earlier this year, I was in the US for a leadership summit, and I did my card swipes couple of times. After third, fourth time, they really blocked my card and sent me an email and a message that we see certain activities which are not normal. And I had to reach out to them, talking about it, and also giving my identification proof. Once I did that, it was a normal activity. But what I want to call out here is, imagine this system not being there. Nobody would have been able to reach out to me proactively and say there's a possibility of fraud because we noticed there's a difference in geography. But then, since we had such a system, it allowed us to have those alert notifications prior, so then we were better be aware than being sorry. And all this data that we collect and we create personas of helps us to identify what is a probable fraudulent activity. Going on to the next one, predictive analytics. It is again something that helps us to identify what patterns are there, what system processes are there, and how does the customer interactions look across. Optimize maintenance scheduling. That is something which helps to understand how does the scheduling of systems look like and when do we have to pitch in to support the ongoing systems. Credit risk assessment, something which is very, very important for any sector that works in finance. If we want to give loans to any customer, or if we want to see what the default rates are, we would really need to understand what the various customer profile is. What is their risk-taking ability, and what is their risk profile? For all of these, the data, what we are looking at, will be the key to do. And specifically, when there are many players in the market, it will also help them to put a strategy which is competitive. Compliance and scenario analysis. Now here I talk about the product development and testing. There could be a product which is very good, very great at the UI UX, but then it really fails to meet the customer needs. Would it still be considered as a good product? Possibly not. So which is why it is very essential that the product that we have is being tested with the right data. And that's possible only when we have the varied and heterogeneous data. With this data set that's available with us, the time to market of the product will definitely be quick. And that's the competitive edge that people can get if they have access to such an information. Regulatory compliance. I don't think so. Compliance is something that I can just not talk about when I'm talking about this financial information. It really assists us in maintaining the regulations and abiding to the lay of the land. Now here, we have talked about a lot of things which tells us that how data is important, right? But I'll quickly tell you about the ongoing evolution that is happening here in the world of finance. And I'm taking a quick example from an India market too. So, per the data analysis by Global Payments Hub PaySecure, UPI, Unified Payments Interface, was at a staggering 3,729.1 transactions processed per second. So, and this is from 2023. So imagine how the numbers would look like when we are today at 2024. That is the volume of transactions or the evolution that is happening in the finance industry today. Another one that I'll quickly talk about. Reserve Bank deputy said that the vibrant e-markets are springing up. Digital economy accounts for 1/10 of India's GDP. And going by this growth rate, we will poise to constitute a fifth of GDP by 2026. Now, the reason why I'm stating all of this is just to highlight that how much evolution is going on in the world of finance. And what is the key to it? Of course, with all the peripherals ecosystem, data is the key to it. And which is why we said the transformation that we are looking at is the duck that we saw prior, which is the cornerstone to our progress. And probably that's the time to wind up the session too. Thank you. Thank you for being a lovely audience, everyone.
Thank you so much. To present a token of appreciation from our side, I call upon Richita Chaudhary, please. It was an amazing session, right? So once again, put your hands together.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's have a happy frame. Yeah. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So